All right, good afternoon. So this is actually the first time I have to say thank you for your patience before I start to talk, but all right, so welcome everybody. We're really happy to be here at Oscon 2014 to talk a little bit about OpenUI5, the responsive web UI library that we built over the course of the past couple of years. So we're going to start off with a quick introduction.
Right, so this is Frederick Berg. He has been developing in UI5 for a couple of years, for example in the theming area, which we'll see later on. And currently he is product owner of the core team of UI5, so really deciding what is currently being built.
Yeah, thanks Andreas. So this is Andreas Kunz. He is kind of responsible for a lot of the features that you will see in a minute. He's the main architect for all of the mobile aspects that we have put together for this UI library. And Andreas, what are you doing?
Oh, I just remembered the soccer World Cup, and I was checking the results of the final game.
I see.
Because, I mean, we are from Germany, so we like to remember that.
Maybe we should at least let the others have a look at this as well.
Show it to them if you can.
Let me go ahead and see if I can bring this up on the screen.
Okay, so that's...
All right, yeah.
So that was the final.
But let me move this over.
So interesting.
But I think
I did like the semi-final.
I think I've seen this before because I've seen a similar application. Let me see if I can bring this up. Yeah, so this is, I think, almost the same thing. I mean, it doesn't look exactly the same, but kind of shows similar data. It just looks different, I think, right?
So that's Brazil, Croatia.
Yeah. So,
but you see all at once. Or what's that?
Exactly. I see. Yeah, it's a different version. I see on the left-hand side all of the match days. That's right.
Oh, that's when I click here. Okay.
Exactly. Yeah. And if you go to a particular match, let's maybe pick, I don't know, semi-final maybe.
Yeah. My favorite one.
Semi-final. Let's look at this one. And on the right-hand side, I see all of the results.
Okay.
Right?
Okay. And if I tab it, then I see the list of players.
Okay, let's do the same thing here. Whoa, nice. Okay, so I have a lot more information apparently. This table, right, that shows the players and the leagues. I have birth dates, league countries.
I don't have birth dates.
That's
interesting.
Yes. Good. All right, so, but what does it have to do with the presentation?
Maybe we should go back to the presentation on OpenUI5, but there's actually a connection because this application was built with OpenUI5.
Okay, do you want to talk a little bit about it, maybe?
Absolutely. So what is OpenUI5? It is basically a JavaScript UI library, a web UI library. It's running all inside the browser. It's implemented in JavaScript, uses a lot of HTML and CSS. When you're using it, you're using the same web technologies that I've mentioned. It accesses data from any kind of server, just via an URL. It could be XML or JSON data. And is independent of the servers. So the main features, or what is special about UI5, is that it comes with a huge number of UI controls. So there are more than 180 controls available inside UI5, ranging from simple buttons and input fields to more complex ones like calendars and date pickers and color pickers and stuff like this. Then there's not only a huge set of controls, but a lot of framework functionality, like support for model view controller concept with XML views or JavaScript views. So some are declarative, or you can also do it in an imperative way. Data binding, routing, just a huge load of framework functionality as well. And then the whole thing, because it's built by SAP, it's enterprise grade, so it supports lots of features that are relevant for very serious applications like accessibility, localization. It's very robust. We do a lot of testing, but we will come to this later. And then it's designed to run on most current browsers, so that's Internet Explorer 9 and up, and pretty much everything else. And also on mobile devices like the iPhone we have just seen, or Android tablets, so whatever you get, it's independent from mouse or touch interaction. Also, the size of the devices is different. So on the iPhone, we have just seen it. On the iPhone, you don't have a lot of space. And UI5 takes care of adapting the application automatically to the available space. So if you as an application developer just write the application once and we take care of the space and of the touch and everything. And last but not least, it's open source. It's available under the Apache 2.0 license. So this means you can use it for basically anything, also for commercial closed source applications in the end if you want. And we also use a lot of open source inside UI5. So it's based on jQuery, for example. We are using less CSS, handlebars, data.js, many other open source libraries, and sort of want to give back to the community by open sourcing it. But enough theory, let's come to some code.
Exactly. So I'm going to start you off by showing you a little bit about the structure of an application that runs with OpenUI5. For this, I'm actually going to go directly into Chrome and show you an example. Let me go ahead and bump up the font size a bit for you. Okay, let me see if you can read this. I think this should work. Okay, so what you see on the screen is a sort of so-called one-page application. So on the left-hand side, you see the code for this. It's a normal HTML page. In the head section of this document, you have a script tag that basically includes one particular JavaScript file, and this represents OpenUI5. There's some configuration as well about which theme to load and which libraries or which set of controls to load initially. But that's really all of the integration necessary in the beginning. And then down here in this in-place script area, we actually create an instance of a control. A control is an element that can be made visible on the screen. In this case, it's a shell control. So it provides sort of a container for an application. And the content inside of it is a button. This button has a configuration. Text is now set to hello Oscon. Let me just go ahead and change this real quick, and I'll go ahead and just update the display, and here we go. Now the way you interact with OpenUI5 is by simply using an API that's defined in the documentation. I'll show this in a second. But you would go ahead and say, there's a particular event that this button can raise for you. In our API, this is called press. So when somebody presses this button, you would go ahead and assign a function to this. And in this, I'll just do the simple, I guess, hello. All right, so let's go ahead and update the page. And now if I click on this button, the alert is triggered by the browser. Okay. Other than this, on the page, we really only have sort of an empty body tag. We put only one div element in it with the ID content. And the link between the JavaScript up here and the div element is by its ID. So content up here is basically the place where you want to insert the generated control tree and make it show up on the page. Okay, so that's a very simple example. Let's go back to the presentation again. We said that we support MVC, so Model View Controller, and maybe a quick word about this. In this sort of setup, you have views that define what should be shown on the screen. So you basically have this file typically where you specify how the building blocks are put together in sort of a hierarchical way. And for example, what we just saw was a button that when pressed, usually sort of somebody needs to react to this press event. And typically in an MVC pattern, this is done on the controller. So the controller is the place where you react to user interactions. And since we normally need to display some sort of data in our applications, this is done in the models part of it. We support different data types in our models. JSON, XML are the most common ones, I guess. And for SAP customers, basically, and others as well in the future, I think this will be a more interesting protocol. This is called OData. It's a sort of a protocol that's defined by Microsoft, SAP, and some others in the industry. So the controller can now create this model and set data to a particular view. And this connection between the model and the view is called data binding. So it kind of updates controls. Data will be shown there. And this works both ways. So imagine you have a form and you see a text field and you can enter some data. This will automatically be pushed back into the model. Okay. So let's go ahead and have a quick look at how this actually looks like in code. This is, again, similar sample. We have the script tag that includes UI5, and underneath you have sort of an inline declaration of a view. Yeah, so this is all now written, in this case, in XML. We have a view on the outermost layer, and then it's kind of nested hierarchically. You have a page with a title that's set to Brazil team, so that's the title up here. Inside of the page is a table, and I'm shortcutting this a little bit. There's basically the definition for certain columns and their content. Yeah? So team number, name, position, birth date, and so on. And so this is the view part, and then underneath you have some sample data. So that's just a JavaScript object, you know, with some properties and an array of the players. Yeah. So we take that data and we basically assign it to a model. Yeah. So this is done at this location down here, yeah, where we basically connect the two together. Yeah. We set a model that contains O team. Yeah, as information. And this is done in the controller. So we have the model, we have the view, we have the controller, and then we basically connect them together and connect them into this content div ID. And this is how it then looks like, a simple table basically with a listing of the data you see on the left-hand side. Yeah. Okay. We said that responsiveness is one of the key features of OpenUI5. Basically, the controls that we've written, they have some logic inside of them that they detect on which device they run, how much space they have, and they can make certain assumptions. For example, you've seen that in the tablet case on the left-hand side, you see both the list and the details in one, basically on one page. Whereas the phone doesn't have that much space, and here it's triggered via a navigation back and forth between these two screen elements. Another difference you might notice is that we had a number of columns for the desktop or for the mobile version, basically here for the tablet version. And since all those 4 columns wouldn't fit on the phone, you can basically give them priorities and say this is a column that could be dropped if I'm on a phone, or that could be shown sort of in place. Yeah? And this is what happens on the right-hand side. So this basically means one code base, and the application dynamically responds to whatever device it's running on and how many space it finds there. So a couple more words about the documentation we have and what we give to the developers. Let me open up something here. So this is basically, first of all, a little bit too large. This is our it's called Demo Kit. It's basically our documentation center. And if we start off in the beginning, we have the developer guide. So this is basically all of the documentation for developers in order to understand how to put together these elements, how to create models, views, controllers, and so on. It's all documented in here. There's a listing of controls primarily built for desktop usage. And there's also an API reference. So if you really need to understand exactly what the API of each control is, all of this is listed right in here as well. There are also some demo applications that we ship along with our documentation. And they look similar to what you've seen in the beginning to this World Cup app. I'll go ahead and open this approve purchase order. So this is one of the sample mobile applications where you can go ahead and see how the final result looks like, and also how it's built. Okay, so those were all controls that SAP has built, and the question is always, how can I add own content into this library, because not everything is done automatically by us. So Andreas will talk a little bit about that.
Right. So if the controls, the 180 controls we provide, are not enough for you, if you need something special or something else, one possibility is to write a custom control. So this is very easy. You can just inline in your JavaScript define new controls. We'll have a look at an example, which is this one here. I'll zoom in again. This should be readable from the very back. The same kind of application we've just seen, very simplified in this sort of preview tool with left the code and right the preview of the application. What we do here is we define a new control by extending an existing one. So here we're extending the base class control, but we could also extend something existing like a button or something else, an input field or so. And what we are creating is now a squared control. So we say my.square is the control type we create here. And how does this control creation happen? So UI5 controls have three parts mainly. One is the API that is defined here in the metadata. The properties, we have here text, which is a string. And such a square obviously has also a size, which is of type CSS size. So UI5 makes automatically sure that only correct values are given here by the application. Then the second part is the part that actually creates the structure in the page, that creates the HTML. This is what we call the renderer. So this is responsible for writing the div or whatever tag that is used. You see it's opened here and closed here. And for example, the text of the control is written here. And the third part is what we call the behavior. So this is everything that goes on while the application is used. So user interaction, like click handlers in this case. So when this square control is clicked, there should again be an alert box, which is here. This is now a very simple example. I mean, it's just a couple of lines of code. There cannot be a lot of stuff going on. But with not a lot more code, we also can do something pretty impressive. Let's try this one. So you don't need to read all the code right now. I'll zoom out a bit so you can see the entire application. So this is now a Google Map UI5 control. Google Maps wrapped in our API as a UI5 control. On the left side you see the code. You don't need to read everything. It's not a lot more code than it was before for the very simple one. But still it's already very powerful. You have a map here. And for all these custom controls, data binding and everything that UI5 supports is also supported out of the box. So this Google Map control we just created here is fully data bound to a model. We have seen that before. And this model is also bound to the sliders here, which are standard UI5 controls. So you see it's two-way binding. When I move the slider, the map moves, or when I move the map, the sliders move. So this is all supported out of the box because UI5 supports this for all the controls. If this control stuff with all the JavaScript is a bit too high level for you, you want really to go down to the HTML level, we also support something that's the HTML templating. This is supported by or powered by Handlebars.js, which is also an open source library, one of the many ones that we included. We have enriched this with support for the UI5 data binding. So you can, inside your HTML templates, which look like this, you can refer to entities in the UI5 data models. So the same two-way data binding is also working with your custom HTML without using any UI5 controls. So this is pretty much similar to Angular.js, I think. Okay, after all this coding, let's step back a little bit. This has been created by SAP. So who of you knows roughly what SAP is, what we do? Maybe raise your hands. Okay, that's just 20%. Who has no clue what SAP is about? That's also 20%. Who was too tired to raise your hand? That's also 20%, so what about the rest? Okay, anyway, SAP, for those who don't know it, our marketing people would probably say 70% of all transactions in the world are handled by SAP systems. Or the figure I like better is 70% of all beer in the world is produced by SAP customers. So, I mean, I don't want to say how great SAP is, but the point is that the software we produce is used by very big companies, is used for mission-critical processes. So when something breaks down, there's really money at risk. And this is why we do quite some extra testing and efforts to make our UI toolkit what we call enterprise grade. So there's some extra quality assurance. We have lots of measures to make sure the quality is right. We have automated tests running every night. So if you have the full test run, it's running more than 24 hours of tests. We have screenshot comparisons. So when something visually breaks, it's easily detected. 4 Is principle, code reviews, lots of things. Then also when something still goes wrong, we need to be able to very quickly support the customer and to fix the problem. So that's why supportability is also a very important feature. Let me show this in an example. Let's just go back to this custom UI5 control, this Google map we have just built. When something goes wrong inside this application, just press Control, Alt, Shift, and S. So basically everything you can, plus S like support. And then you get this nice pop-up here, which contains some support information. So first is technical information about versions and build states and different components that are used and loaded. Second one is a JavaScript trace. You could enable to analyze what is going on behind the scenes. But I like most the third one, the control tree. Can you read this from the back? Oh, wrong button. So the control tree displays all the controls in the page and the control structure in the page. This Google Map control wasn't delivered with UI5, but still it's a member of this game and it's fully working also in the supportability mode. You see this Google Map control and there's a button which is now hidden behind the window. When you click the controls on the left side in this support pop-up, they are highlighted in the real application. So you can find out which one is which one. You can also find out where the values come from. For example, the latitude and longitude of this Google Map are coming from data binding. So you can inspect the model where the data comes from. Or you can also do live changes of the whole thing, like let's set the latitude to 30 degrees, then you see the map is moving. So this is really live inspection of the application. And this is something you don't get with any other UI library, I think. More features that make UI5 enterprise grade are internationalization and support for right-to-left languages like Arabic and Hebrew. This is all coming out of the box. Accessibility for blind people, screen reader support with the ARIA standard, so the UI can be read by machines and can be read aloud for blind people. Extensibility, of course, if customers or partners want to extend our applications and add something without modification. Or also theming is an interesting topic, which probably Frederick, who created most of it, should talk about now.
Exactly. So, yeah, theming is important because typically customers that get our applications, they would like to, adapt them to show their company colors. Yeah? So corporate identity is important. They want their customer logo to show up. Maybe have a certain background image or things like this. And for this, we said in the beginning, we're based on less CSS preprocessor language. So we built a tool around this that lets you create or adapt one of the themes that we delivered to your liking. And I'll give you a quick demo of this. Let me see. There we go. So the tool I'm using for this, I'm going to zoom out a little bit. So the tool I'm using for this is called Theme Designer. So this is also available for free in the cloud. You can use this directly. So what I have here is basically in the middle of the page I have my application running, the one that we've seen before. Yeah? So right now you probably notice it has a blue line across the top of the application. And if I make a change in here and I kind of select this line, there's also the highlights in dark blue. The selected element has sort of a light blue. So it's all variations of a particular color. Yeah? On the right-hand side, you see that we have exposed certain parameters for this theme. And one of the parameters, for example, is the brand color. So I'll just go ahead and set this to make my life simple. I just set it to red. Okay. And then right away you get the live preview of how the theme is adapted. Yeah? So the brand line up here has now changed. Let's also do the same thing for the highlight color. So I'll just go ahead and set this to red as well. Now, what this now has done is, if I go back to this first page, and go ahead and select another line again, you'll see that the highlight color has been adapted. The selection color here is now a shade of red as well. So this then really changes a lot of CSS in our application all of a sudden. Now to make things a little bit more interesting, let's go ahead and add a background image to the application. Yeah, so I'll use this one. And also a custom company logo. So this is kind of a demo logo. And let's go ahead and have a look at the application in full screen mode. Yeah. So this was a 2-minute modification of a theme with a background image, customer logo, some color changes and this. And you can imagine if you put more effort into this, you can really spice things up. And compared with the original theme, the result is pretty nice, I guess. Okay. So theming is possible. You can export a theme like the one I just created, basically, and run it on your local server. If you put more effort into this, this is an example of how you can change from the left-hand side to the right-hand side. Yeah, really change the entire theme dramatically with this tool. Okay, Andres will show some examples of applications.
So we have seen some applications that look like our World Cup application, which have the blue crystal theme. This is now what we call gold reflection theme. So there are different themes shipped with UI5. This is an SAP Business One Cloud example. This is another application for travel expense management. This is also used internally inside SAP productively. So this is actually my flights, and this is the application where I will get back my money, hopefully, after the trip to the Oscon conference. So I hope there are no bugs that prevent this. This is another application that has been specifically coded for iPad for some reason, which has a very different design. So you see, they can look very different. And this is also an interesting application where we come back to the football or soccer topic. A German football team has lots of technology stuff for their training. They have sensors in the ball, sensor in the socks, and they record the movements of the players like 300 times a second and track everything, analyze the data, and check when did somebody lose the ball or score a goal or something like this. And this is then collected in this kind of application, and then the trainer can jump to key scenes of the game and analyze which player was walking where and stuff. So that's, for me as a football fan, it's very technical, but as a technology fan, it's pretty cool, I would say. And it's built with UI5, obviously. This is also an application I like pretty much. This is also built with UI5, but this one is not really a business application. It's just served to, supposed to show you that very different kinds of applications can be built with UI5. PacMan is also control. The ghosts are controls. They inherit from a creature control. So this could stimulate your imagination of what you can build with UI5. And finally, why is this thing now open source? So it was developed in-house in SAP for 4 or 5 years already, so that's why it's so mature and comprehensive. It was developed under the name SAP UI5. So the 5 is not a version number, it's SAP Development Toolkit for HTML5, and we shortened everything away except for the SAP and UI5. And now the open source version is called OpenUI5. The background story of open sourcing it is that customers and partners, the SAP mentors, which are a group of application developers around SAP, pushed SAP very hard because they were using UI5 for their SAP projects, but they liked it a lot and also wanted to use it for their other projects that were not related to SAP. And then also we from inside, we used a lot of open source, and we are open source fans, and we also wanted to make it open source, and so the combined pressure finally allowed us to force our management, so to say, to make it open source. This happened only half a year ago in December. This is probably why you also didn't hear a lot about it so far. And the name under which it was now open source is OpenUI5. It's basically the same thing as SAP UI5. The code is identical. There are just some exotic libraries missing from the open source version. And what we did since then is we created the OpenUI5.org homepage of the whole thing. So there you will find the download and everything. There's a GitHub page with a GitHub repository. Our sources are currently not available for sourcing in GitHub, available for forking in GitHub, because we currently are restructuring them, but we will be finished with this soon in August, September. Then you can also fork it. You can, of course, download the sources already in a zip archive and look at everything. It's JavaScript. You can also go to GitHub already and report any bugs you find. So This is where you find everything. So on the OpenUI5.org page, there's the basic introduction, but also links to the documentation, the demo kit we have seen before with the demo applications, with the API documentation, all the controls and everything. So when you start from OpenUI5.org, you will find everything.
Exactly, and this concludes our presentation. Make sure to check it out on the web. We have a booth in the main hall, so if you come in to the right, basically we're set up at the corner there. You can come and ask us some questions there if there's anything. Check us out on Twitter as well. You can follow us on OpenUI5. And we really hope you try this out and give it a shot. Okay, Thanks very much. In case you have any questions, we got a couple more minutes left, I think, even though we couldn't get the projector working in time. But yeah.
Is there anything about OpenUI5 that's, and especially you're moving forward with it, that an influencer are going to be influenced by AngularJS and that methodology? Because there are some similarities. Curious.
Yeah, so we are looking very closely at AngularJS because it's very popular. I think the HTML templating that we have done here with handlebars is very close, but we are looking at more ways how to get closer, maybe not really integrated, but get as close as possible. So the development is not clearly planned to go in this direction, but we are looking very closely.
Yes, please. Localize. Yeah, I'll take this one. The question was how easy it is to do localization, right? So basically the way, what you've seen before when I showed the models is that we have certain data sources that you can connect to a UI, a JSON and XML data. But there's also a third type of model. We call it the resource model, and it basically is fed properties files. You might know this from Java development maybe. Basically a key and a string. You can take these files in a source format and basically translate them into different versions of this file. The language key or the locale key is then part of the file name. And this model will then, depending on the browser setting, the language in the browser, require one file or another, and then all the text will be automatically translated, again done via data binding. So we kind of bind against logical keys, and the specific language is then pulled from the particular file for this language.
Yeah. So as an application developer, you just don't hardcode the text, but you bind it against the model, and just have several files, one for each language, and then we take care of the rest.
Yes, please.
What testing frameworks are available for developers? Jasmine.
Okay, the question was which testing frameworks are available or used. We are using internally, we are using mostly QUnit, the unit testing from jQuery. We are also using Selenium, I think.
Exactly. Selenium for basic browser testing, so basically the clickstreams.
But you're not limited to that, so you can also use any other JavaScript or web UI testing framework.
Yes, maybe.
So what am I comparing? Is this dependent on any other JavaScript libraries, such as jQuery?
So the question was whether it's dependent on any other jQuery libraries. We basically ship a complete package. jQuery is part of the distribution of UI5, so are many of the other open source libraries. They're already packaged together. So when you go to OpenUI5.org and you check out the download, the SDK contains all of this already. So there's nothing you need to add to OpenUI5 to make it run or something like this. Yeah.
And then is there any integration or bridge with Bootstrap? I know this is sort of...
Yeah.
So, okay, the question was, is there any integration also with Bootstrap? There's actually an open source project, I think, called UI5Strap, which is attempting to do such an integration. We are currently not doing this ourselves inside, but obviously people are trying to combine it. So there's something going on in the community already, thanks to the open sourcing.
Yes, maybe you're done here first. Yep.
So I was wondering if it would work if you maybe make use of app cache in offline applications.
So the question was whether this works as well in sort of in an offline scenario, let's say. So one of the scenarios that we see for this would be the use of something like Apache Cordova, as a hybrid container where you package the entire application plus the runtime, and you then make sort of a native application or a hybrid application out of it, which you can then install on, let's say, a smartphone. That's certainly possible with UI5, and that's something that we've seen happening. Yeah.
But again, with the application cache, so even without a native wrapper, you could also use this, so there's no problem. One behind it.
Yeah.
So the question, I think, was about when it's combined with other libraries, is there known problem with conflicts? There's no specific issue we know. Of course, when you put many libraries together, it could happen that they don't work well together. I mean, UI5 itself is already a very complete package. So this is where we take care of making sure that the different libraries we use, like jQuery, handlebars, data.js, less, that all these libraries that we already combine, that they are playing well together. So I would even say there's no need to integrate it with Bootstrap and others. But if you do, it's possible, and normally it works, I would say. But of course, we cannot exclude the possibility that there are conflicts.
Take maybe one more question. I think you wanted to ask.
Yeah, I was just wondering, so when you have the theme pickers and stuff, are there ways to specifically pick, every UI element, what colors you want those to be, or do you just do it in a more general way and then make custom?
Yeah, so the question was with the theme designer how you can, let's say, influence particular control instances on the page. In general, we take the generic approach that you have certain base parameters that you can change, and those will affect any instance of that control type. So the button highlight color will be the same for any button instance on the page. What we also support is a bit of custom CSS, let's say. So if you need this for a particular application, you could give that instance of the control on this page in this specific position a particular ID, some fixed point by which you can then reference this in custom CSS and then overstyle it this way. That's something possible, but in general the tool creates a generic theme with these new colors.
And if you want to have something in between a generic thing and one instance, so if you want to style all buttons in a different color or so, there's also, I think, control-specific less parameters that are sort of advanced mode features in the theme designer.
That's right. Yeah. Okay, I think we're at the end of the time that was allotted for us. So thanks very much again. If you have additional questions, just come see us tomorrow or something at the booth in the main hall.
Be around. Okay. Thank you.